shit on Phoenix in a funny way because everybody who lives here, it's like one of those things where it's like your kid's sister. Like, you can say bad things about her. But as soon as somebody else says something bad about her, our tendency as a community is to get really upset.
Yes,
like when the Simpsons did the ASU joke. As an ASU
heavens
undergrad,
easier to get into than ASU.
That's funny. Come on, everybody who went there knows those guys. Those people, that was their college experience. That joke is funny. Let's not be so sensitive about it. Let's acknowledge that Phoenix is a weird place with like a ton of weird different people.
Yes.
And that there's layers here.
There,
Shrek onion, if you will.
Yes.
For the parents
it's
in the room.
It layers, yes.
So
I've seen Shrek.
We have not graduated to Shrek yet. We're still on Thomas and Friends.
Okay. So the point I keep trying to push my nephews further faster.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but they set their own boundaries, which I think is hilarious.
Oh, that's good.
As a child, I did not acknowledge boundaries.
Which pretty much, like, how old are your nephews?
9 and 6.
So pretty much when, like, your oldest nephew turns 11, that's when you start showing him the Dead Zone and Videodrome?
No. He's very clear about this is like how about the Fantastic Beasts series?
Oh, okay.
And they're like, this looks like a little too much for us.
Yeah.
And I was like, really, guys? Come on. I'm trying to like sell it. Like sometimes you have to be brave, and sometimes this is exciting, and scary things can be okay. And they're like, we're gonna pass. We're a hard pass on this.
Huh.
Those are the first ones that were like first Harry Potter type movies that were just rated PG-13 out of the gate, right? Because like Sorcerer's Stone, that's the first movie, right? Or Philosopher's Stone.
Jesus, Jason, I don't have fallopian tubes. I don't need to know these things. Do you know these things?
I think it is the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, so
my wife is listening about a week from now, and she's like cringing.
I believe it is. I believe it is the Sorcerer's Stone. So I think that it's got to be a generational thing, right? Because when I was, between 6 and 9, I was a voracious reader, and there was either kid literature or there was adult literature, and there was not any of this tween or teen stuff, or at least not. I mean, there was like, I don't know, you could say, I guess, like Sweet Valley High stuff or Fear Street, or I skipped over all of that. So I went from Encyclopedia Brown to reading Douglas Adams.
Sure.
So I mean, and I don't think that I've read all of Douglas Adams' books many times, and which is why it was great to see his name when Chris Ayres did the montage, like little collage of authors, including Camus and Vonnegut and all of that, to see Douglas Adams there. But it was like I jumped into some science fiction and fantasy stuff too, because that was kind of like, I don't know.
And as we were discussing the other day, after that,
there are all these stepping stones now.
Yeah. So Disney back in the early 80s used to make like horror movies. And one of the movies that they made a really good adaptation of Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yeah.
And my dad like rented it for me because it was like, he's like, it's Disney, I don't care. I like Ray Bradbury, and I watched it with him. And it didn't freak me out like Poltergeist, but it's creepy as hell.
It is. The whole Jonathan Pryce's character, and it's I think that was a time when Disney would make some kind of some sort of films that they wouldn't make for kids now. I don't think.
I had one called Watcher in the Woods.
Yeah, that's what I was about to bring that up.
Yeah, Watcher in the Woods was terrifying.
That was the other one that
Betty
they watched
Davis,
too. Is that we would watch Watcher in the Woods, and there was Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I think they stopped after that. And I was so...
That second Wizard of Oz movies, guys.
That was trippy shit.
Like 80s,
yes, trippy shit.
80s were appalling. The way we were raised in the way... It with like just no supervision, but we had just entered modernity where it wasn't safe for children anywhere.
Yeah.
So we were all like...
Yeah, I was thinking like the TV shows that I was watching at the time would have been MacGyver and the A-Team, Knight Rider, all of these any of the action 80s shows would have been Magnum PI. That was all the stuff I was watching at that time. And I mean, I was like 10. I don't think that...
Yeah.
I think I was like 12 when the first time Twin Peaks came around. And like, holy shit.
Hug those kids from the 80s because seriously, we were like psychologically traumatized.
Oh, we're all fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally unsupervised.
Yeah, I was...
Popped out in the Reagan era.
We were... I can definitely say that there were times where I was raised by television. And I probably shouldn't... I remember specifically just watching Labyrinth and just being fascinated by puppets and David Bowie's codpiece.
There was a lot of stuff. I mean, and that was one of the ways that my mom raised me was pretty much, as an example, she said that I could swear when I knew what it meant. So, so when I found out what fuck meant, that's
go time.
It was go time. Yep. The things like that, but she was very, at least with me, and maybe not so much with my brother because he couldn't handle it, but be like more, trusting of me to be a little adult almost, which is, I don't necessarily say that was the best way to do things, but it made me expose me to a lot of things that I don't think most kids my age, especially in the 80s, were being exposed to because, we had cable too. So, there was HBO and there was always somebody was watching AMC or there was Turner Classic Movies wasn't there yet, but whatever the equivalent of that back then was. So I was always watching like Woody Allen films, or my mom's favorites were Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. So there was a lot of like that sort of thing. And it's almost like it was kind of a shock being like in school with other people who I was listening to, more music for adults. When grunge was around, I wasn't listening to grunge. I was listening to like Elvis Costello and Nebraska and getting into Bob Dylan, and people were listening to Primus and Metallica and Pearl Jam and whatnot. So
I like how you sing all.
I think that's a pretty normative experience for people in the arts. Is always that that exposure to the things that were maybe not necessarily the prevalent force. I know that I got my television taken away a lot as a kid for getting into trouble. So when the TV was revoked, we would have I read a lot. My dad read a lot, so. At a certain point, I remember being 8 and feeling that I was old enough for adult books, and then having that conversation. He had this book that he was reading, that he would like. How those cult books became really popular in the 80s, like The Experience of the Child Cult.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So it was one of those books. It was Michelle Remembers. It was one of those cult books where like the kid gets tortured, the whole thing. So my dad would hide it under his recliner when he went to work, so that I couldn't find this book and read it. But I was very insistent that I be allowed these things. So I read the book, I got in trouble, had nightmares, and then, was then allowed to read adult literature, but there was some conversations about what that literature should be.
And I remember my dad had like those Anne Rule books sometimes, and I'd like look through those, and he was like into like...
Oh, like the true crime stuff?
Yeah, like true crime stuff and like cults and stuff.
Green River Murder and...
there was one, like The Believers, I think, where it was like an alien cult or something. It was weird. But my dad would also... would also go to the bookstore like every like Monday and Thursday and just pick up like a slew of magazines. And one of the ones he'd always pick up is like Premiere.
Oh.
Which was like the big movie magazine. It was just amazing. And I would read these like glorious like descriptions of like movies that I would never get to see. And between that and then going to like back when there was Blockbuster videos, they used to just give you a catalog of like all the videos they would have available that you could order. And we just read these descriptions like,
I really like getting the Suncoast catalog. Yeah. It's interesting. So I think that this ties nicely into The Good Place, and well, no, it does. And here's why. Hear me out. Okay. And shows kind of like that. The shows that we get on Netflix and the other. These are the shows that are being made by the people our age now, pretty much. Sure. And so there's this kind of humor out there and this kind of writing that I think is informed by the people that were exposed to what we were exposed to as kids. And that's, it seemed like for a while there was not a lot out there in the television landscape that I felt like was for me or that I was terribly interested in. I think the last show, and excluding the final season, I think the last NBC show that I was really excited about prior to Parks and Recreation had been Scrubs. And because I thought that there was some smart humor in it, and it was before Zach Braff started wearing on everyone, and there was great music in it, and but fast forward another 10 years later or so, and we get these things like The Office, which I'm finally starting to watch because I'm giving it another chance after I wrote it off because I didn't think it was as good as the British version. And Parks and Rec and stuff like Glow or Orange is the New Black or these shows that I don't think we've gotten to this media landscape where you can have a show like The Good Place on a network like NBC and they'll renew it for another season, which means, hey, we're probably going to get to 50 plus episodes of the podcast. If we maintain our friendship throughout. Yes.
Frozen yogurt every year.
Yeah. Toasting it. Yeah. Frozen yogurtinis. But it's this, and I'm sure that as somebody who has to, for their job, watch the music scene also, there's always this kind of slow dinosaur mentality towards catching up with what how consumers are actually consuming, right? Sure. Because people are hanging on to the record label model for far too long. Obviously publishers, all of the large kind of conglomerate type stuff is either consolidating into a single thing owned by Disney or Sony, or you're getting a bunch of small startup companies that are fulfilling these needs and managing to survive, because if you have something that enough people are interested in, you can kind of make a go of it at this point.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine kind of ties into this too, because
I was so happy to watch the new episode.
Yes, it's so good. Where it's definitely written by someone who is my age, because as much as I can reference Die Hard as much as Jake Peralta has.
Yes,
I end up looking like Charles and being weird.
Boyd. Yes,
but and it's
Boyle. Yeah, that's right.
And I was thinking, I just read Meet Me in the Bathroom, which is like a
I've been wanting to read that one.
Of 2001 to 2011 music, like the New York scene, and just how every label bent over backwards to sign the Strokes and the yeahs, not realizing that already people who were already knew about the Strokes, that they were already illegally downloading their EP, and everyone is so ignorant of it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, that's how kids are getting, and I've brought this up on the show, like, this is how kids, like, half our age are now getting into The Office and are now getting into The Good Place, because they'll catch it on Netflix and they'll think it's like the new shit, where I was like watching
Sure.
I was watching The Office 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Let me get off my porch.
But I mean, I don't know. It's great, right? Because
yeah. I don't. To be totally honest, if we're going to be totally honest, and I might get kicked out of the room for this, I actually hate sitcoms. I hate sitcoms. I hate the format of sitcoms.
Get out.
Just a situational comedy.
You hop in your vanity plate car right now.
Get in the YabYum mobile and ride on out of here.
It's just, like, I just feel like my whole life is wasted 30 minutes for a laugh. And there are shows that I